this angle. Oh, excellent. I did wonder where you'd gone, James, especially since I was speaking with you 5 minutes ago. Here you go, fella. It's yours.
Oh, wonderful.
There you go.
I think I already am mic'd up, so I don't think I need that.
Good stuff.
Yep. And also a lectern would be fantastic. Perfect. All right. Well, since we're running a little late while we're waiting for the slides to get put up on, I can go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about myself and my role specifically at Chainlink Labs. So for those of you who are not aware, Chainlink Labs is the centralized entity that basically is the steward of the Chainlink protocol. And the Chainlink protocol is a series of decentralized Oracle networks that exist to put data that is off-chain, on-chain, in a secure, reliable, and trust-minimized way. So this kind of information can be essentially anything. It can be computation, it can be data, storage, so on and so forth. So really it is completely agnostic to whatever you're trying to put on-chain. And this is especially relevant to blockchain gaming, to the metaverse in a few critical ways. Thank you, Miles. Really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and dive right in, since I already got done with the introduction. About myself, I primarily work on the technical side. So I help blockchain games, metaverses, and many more NFT projects integrate Chainlink solutions in order to actually enhance their project. Now, this also means that I lead the gaming and metaverse strategy. So primarily my focus is how can we increase the adoption of decentralized oracles in blockchain gaming and metaverses to increase and minimize the trust that's needed when you're playing these games, when you're building in these lands. Okay, so like I mentioned, Chainlink in short is a way and a protocol to enable off-chain resources to be empowered and utilized on the blockchain itself. So Chainlink is completely blockchain agnostic. We don't play favorites, and we utilize and integrate with many different blockchains. So we have currently over 14 integrations across the entirety of the space. So we really aim to empower, no matter where it is, the different applications that are being built. Now, like I mentioned, this can be data. So we really got our name from our price feed information, but we've since expanded into numerous different things, such as computation, storage, any kind of data point that you'd like to put on chain, we can help you. So you may be wondering, and for those of you who are not familiar with Chainlink or what an Oracle network is, an Oracle network is essentially a set of Sybil-resistant nodes and independent nodes that actually aggregate information and then exist to put this on chain in order to make it censorship resistant. So as I mentioned, this is really where we got our first integrations, was in the DeFi community, but we've since expanded out from there to many different verticals that we aggregate this information. So we use cryptographic techniques in order to make sure that the data that's being put on chain is come to consensus and to make it secure and reliable for parties to use. This also means that it's interoperable between many different applications, and that is crucial when you're building these games. We talked a lot about interoperability, composability in games, and that's critical in order to make sure that the data that you're using can be utilized and you can make sure that it'll be around for decades to come. We source this data from multiple different data providers in order to put it on. You can think of weather data to basically enhance different horse racing games, for instance. We've seen a lot of use cases in this, or even things like sports data. With the World Cup going on right now, we see a lot of different ways that people want to utilize this real-world data on-chain in order to empower these different applications. And like I mentioned earlier, Chainlink is completely blockchain agnostic, so we don't really care what blockchain we're deploying on. We can actually deploy on any kind of blockchain, and that's really important for basically our integrations. So how this actually manifests, since I know that was somewhat abstract, and then I can break it down into specific solutions that we provide. The first one is called data feeds, and we currently secure the vast majority of all the transaction value secured across all of DeFi. And this means that our pricing information can be used in order to secure your DeFi application or metaverse that uses some of these pricing information. Now, what's really critical is this can be any kind of arbitrary data. So like I mentioned, weather data, sports data, et cetera, can all be put on chain in a secure and reliable way, and that's really what we aim to empower. Next, we have VRF, which is our most used solution in blockchain gaming. Many people don't know, and as we talk to many different Web 2 game studios, they don't realize that randomness on chain can be exploited because a blockchain is deterministic. And this is really crucial when you actually are securing value with your blockchain game. So in order to make sure that any randomness component that you use, which is extremely common in games, you need to make sure that it's done in a verifiable and transparent way to give credence to your community, to give credibility to your application, and to make sure that it's not exploitable. So we see a lot of adoption here in blockchain gaming. The one proof of reserve, I wanted to include it not because it's particularly relevant for blockchain gaming and metaverses, but because there's a lot of talk about the solvency of exchanges. I think I don't need to mention and go into so much detail there, but we also are a huge focus on security. And basically, proof of reserve is a way to ensure that any collateral you're kind of using, whether it's cross-chain, can actually be securely collateralized to make sure that it's constantly backed. So for instance, if you're minting gold as a tokenized form, then we can make sure that you have gold in reserves off-chain in order to collateralize that gold token. The last one is Chainlink automation, and Chainlink automation is used to really make your smart contracts come alive. So by itself, smart contracts just exist on the blockchain, and until you send a transaction to them, they are essentially just sitting there. And what we can do is enable the smart contracts to interact with themselves and automate certain processes. So you can think of it as a decentralized AWS. And basically what this means is you can create really exciting things like dynamic NFTs and other things that are really important for blockchain gaming and metaverses. So that's the one thing I want to touch on because we're seeing massive adoption specifically in dynamic NFTs. And there's many ways that you can actually utilize this. So for instance, you can have like a base NFT where I just mint one. And then I can pull in off-chain resources such as weather data, sports data to actually upgrade and change this NFT over time as it changes and it becomes more dynamic. So we see a lot of demand specifically for dynamic NFTs because with games, the assets that are actually tokenized are constantly changing, and we need to reflect the off-chain resource, whether it's in a game engine or anything, with the on-chain value that you're securing. So as a kind of a concrete example of how that's used in gaming, for instance, you can upgrade and you can change a character or an item or a weapon, a shield and sword based on some off-chain resource or over a certain period of time. So that's really interesting where we've seen things like flowers that can bloom, and then this actually augments the traits that are associated with the NFT. And that is a really interesting characteristic to make these NFTs come alive. And that's really what we want to empower. The one thing that I would like to touch on, especially because it's super relevant during the World Cup right now, is specifically the changing of dynamic NFTs based on like real world sports data. So you can think of that you have like a mint for a base athlete, and then based on their actual real world performance, then this changes over time, and maybe you get certain additional things like a raffle, you can get a signed helmet, you can get invited to the game, so on and so forth. So we've seen a lot of projects integrate these in order to basically make it more appealing and give more utility to the token. And that was a project that we worked on with the NBA last year for the 2022 playoffs, where basically you can mint a player card, a base NFT, and then on the real life performance taken from an API that they're using, this augments it and gives additional rewards and more utility to the actual NFT. So I think this is a really concrete example of how this can be applied not only to NFT collections, but how you can pull this data into blockchain gaming, into different metaverses to augment the NFTs over time. Now I talked a little bit about our randomness solution, and I'd like to go over there because a really common use case that we see is loot boxes and mystery boxes. And as I previously alluded to, randomness is a really hard problem to solve on the blockchain because it's deterministic. And so we invented this solution, and we see a lot of use cases, specifically in things like loot boxes, to increase your customer engagement and keep them actually incentivized to coming back, because you can do things like gamified reveals of items contained within a loot box. So this is a really common paradigm in Web 2 gaming, and we actually empower it in Web 3 gaming. So we see a lot of adoption in the ways that reveals are done for NFTs in order to make a more gamified experience for your user base. The last thing that I'd like to touch on is also for RNG in the blockchain game itself. So you can think of any kind of dynamic that utilizes RNG. So if I'm playing an MMO that's on the blockchain and I loot a monster, then I have a certain chance to actually loot a valuable and rare item from them, which is commonly tokenized as an NFT. Now, with VRF, you can also make sure that that value is secured and also give transparency to your community that nothing was manipulated or basically gamed in any way. So that's also a really common use case that we see blockchain games utilizing, especially when you're securing some kind of value. You really want that input and output randomness of your game to be reflected on-chain and verifiable. The last thing that I'll mention specifically with our integrations is we are currently developing a solution called Cross-Chain Interoperability Protocol. So this has gotten a lot of adoption. We worked with partners like the Swift network, and we're also building out a few alpha partners. So we're currently in the testing stage. And what this actually enables you to do is to expand your player base to every kind of chain that you would like. So currently we're focused on EVM chains, and this allows you to maximize that player base rather than focusing on one core chain. You can integrate with many different chains and pass arbitrary data between them in a secure way. So you may want to, for instance, transfer tokens between different chains or just pass messages between these different chains. And this really enables you to expand your player base to make sure that you're capturing as many players as you can and as many users rather than being stuck on one chain. And this is a very complex issue, so rather than game developers building out their own proprietary systems, we create an open source solution that anybody can tap into to utilize this protocol. The last thing I'd like to just talk about is the Chainlink ecosystem as a whole. So currently we have over 350 gaming integrations. So people like Illuvium, Bored Ape Yacht Club, Etherny, PancakeSwap, Pull Together, Axie Infinity, many, many more. We have integrated in a variety of ways, whether it's dynamic NFTs or secure randomness, so on and so forth. So we have experience in doing this for many different projects, and we'd be happy to talk more about how we can also empower your project. We have over 1,000 different Oracle networks, and in the 5 years that we've been supporting the DeFi community, we've never had an exploit or anything like this. So we have a good understanding of security from a very foundational aspect, and we're currently integrated in over 14 chains. So like I mentioned, we're completely blockchain agnostic, and really the goal is to empower the blockchain gaming community to disperse it across as many chains as possible and increase the player base in a way that's not possible without blockchain Oracle networks. So all that said, I want to thank you for learning about how Chainlink basically utilizes our platform, a little bit about decentralized Oracle networks, and yeah, happy to take any questions, but otherwise, let's get some lunch. Thank you. Question?
How is the benchmark on speed size on gaming integrations?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
How's the speed, actually?
The speed
Yeah.
between the different, yeah. So that's a good question. So the answer is that it's different between different chains because of basically finality on different chains. So you really have to analyze the different chains, what their kind of finality state is. And then once this is kind of finalized by the set of Oracle networks that are exchanging this information, then the data passes through. So it likely will not be the case where you've like sub-second latency. So there will be some basically delay in like the transaction finality. Yep. Thank you.
Well done, James. Okay, folks, it's that time of day. It's time for food. Let's get those sugar levels up. Let's get restoked. Let's do a bit of networking and see who you can meet and what wonders lie ahead. We shall reconvene